The courtroom fell silent, as my own flesh and blood glared at me from across the aisle. My son Nathan, whom I'd raised single-handedly after his mother's death, was suing me for trespassing in the very house I still owned. The judge reviewed the paperwork, her expression unreadable. How had we come to this? The craftsman house with the red door had been our family dream, purchased with my late wife 30 years ago. Now it was the battleground for the most painful fight of my life. I never imagined I'd be sitting across from my own son in a courtroom. Even now, at 64, with my graying hair and weathered hands that had worked 40 years at the Canton manufacturing plant, I could hardly believe it. Those same hands had once cradled Nathan as a newborn, taught him to throw a baseball, and helped build the model rockets he loved, launching in the backyard. After Margaret died from breast cancer, when Nathan was 15, it was just the two of us against the world. I'd work double shifts, sometimes 16 hours straight, to keep our life as normal as possible. Nathan had always been a sensitive kid, taking his mother's death especially hard. I made sure I never missed a single parent-teacher conference, basketball game, or science fair. We had our rough patches during his teenage years, sure, but what father and son don't? When Nathan got accepted to the state university on a partial scholarship, I couldn't have been prouder. He was the first in our family to go to college. I took on weekend work to help cover the costs that his scholarship didn't. Every sacrifice seemed worth it when he walked across that stage with his business degree, Margaret's photo in his wallet pocket. The economy wasn't great when Nathan graduated 6 years ago. Marketing jobs were scarce in our area, and Nathan struggled with a series of temporary positions and internships. He'd been sharing an apartment with 2 college friends, but when their lease ended and his roommates moved out of state for better opportunities, Nathan was in a tight spot financially. "Dad, I hate to ask this," he said over dinner at our regular Sunday meetup at Barney's Diner, "but I'm between apartments, and the job market is brutal right now. Would it be okay if I stayed at the old house for a few months until I get back on my feet?" The old house was our original family home, a charming 3-bedroom craftsman style with the red front door that Margaret had insisted on painting herself. We'd moved to a smaller place, closer to my work after she died, but I'd kept the family home, partially out of sentimentality and partially as a rental property that supplemented my income. The last tenants had moved out 2 months earlier, and I hadn't gotten around to finding new ones. "Of course," I told him, not even hesitating. "Stay as long as you need. No rent necessary. Just cover the utilities and keep the place in good shape." The relief in his eyes nearly brought tears to mine. "Thanks, Dad. I promise it won't be for long." I gave him the keys that night. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. I'd stop by every weekend, bringing groceries and checking that the aging water heater was still functioning properly. The house needed some maintenance, and I wanted to make sure Nathan was comfortable. He always greeted me warmly, accepting the groceries gratefully and updating me on his job search. Around the 6-month mark, I began noticing subtle changes in his demeanor. He started meeting me at the door rather than inviting me in for coffee like he used to. When I asked about coming inside to check on a leaky faucet in the master bathroom, he said, "Maybe next time, Dad. The place is a mess." The following week, when I did make it inside, I noticed he had started referring to his old bedroom as my room, and the master bedroom that had once been mine and Margaret's as my bedroom instead of the master bedroom. The living room was now my living room. Each time he said the word "my," it felt like a small pinprick. "You've been doing some redecorating," I observed, noticing that some of the family photos were missing from the hallway wall. "Just updating a bit," he said casually. The decor was getting pretty dated. I bit my tongue. The dated decor included photos of his mother that had hung in that hallway since before he was born. The next month, I stopped by on a Thursday, instead of my usual Saturday. Nathan seemed surprised and slightly annoyed to see me. "I was in the neighborhood," I explained. "Thought I'd drop by those cookies you like from Wilson's Bakery." "You should call first," he said, taking the bakery box but not inviting me in. I could have had friends over or been busy with work stuff. I nodded, trying to ignore the sting. "Sure. Next time I'll call ahead." When I did make it inside the following weekend, I realized all the family photos were now gone. Every single one. The walls were bare, except for some modern art prints I'd never seen before. "Nathan, what happened to all our family pictures?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "I stored them in the attic," he said, not meeting my eyes. "They were cluttering up the space, and I needed a fresh start." "This is my space now, Dad." I stood in stunned silence. Among those cluttering photos were irreplaceable pictures of Margaret holding Nathan as a baby, snapshots from family vacations, and the last family portrait we'd taken before her diagnosis. Some of those photos were the only copies we had. "I'd like to have some of those back," I said quietly. "Especially the ones of your mother." "I'll dig them out sometime," he replied dismissively. "They're fine up there." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the few family photos I had kept when we moved. For the first time, I wondered if letting Nathan stay in the house had been a mistake. But I quickly pushed the thought away. He was going through a tough time. Once he found steady employment, things would return to normal. I was sure of it. The first real warning sign I couldn't ignore came at Thanksgiving. I had always hosted the holiday at my apartment since it was closer to where most of the family lived, but Nathan insisted we hold it at his house that year. "There's more space," he argued, "and I want to show everyone what I've done with the place." I agreed, thinking it might actually be nice to return to our old family traditions in the home where we'd celebrated so many holidays with Margaret. My brother Bill and his wife Susan would be coming, along with their adult children, and my sister Patricia from Columbus. When I arrived early to help with preparations, Nathan already had the turkey in the oven. He'd rearranged the furniture completely and painted the dining room a deep navy blue that I barely recognized. "Welcome," he said with a sweeping gesture. "What do you think of my house now?" There it was again. My house. I swallowed my discomfort and complimented his efforts. Throughout the afternoon, as family arrived, Nathan played the role of proud homeowner perfectly. "Let me show you what I've done with my living room," he'd say. Or, "Come see the new lighting I installed in my kitchen." Each time he emphasized the word "my," I felt more like a guest than the actual owner of the property. During dinner, he regaled everyone with his plans for his backyard come spring, and how he was considering opening up the wall between my kitchen and my dining room. After the meal, while Nathan was showing my niece the renovated powder room, Bill pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Cliff, what's going on here?" he asked in a low voice. "Nathan keeps talking like he owns this place. Did you give him the house?" "No," I said, rinsing a plate with more force than necessary. "He's just staying here temporarily until he gets on his feet." Bill raised his eyebrows. "Temporary, huh? Seems like he's putting down some pretty permanent roots, and making some expensive changes for someone who's just passing through." "He's just proud of the improvements he's making," I defended, though doubt had already taken root in my mind. "If you say so," Bill replied, unconvinced. "Just be careful. Situations like this can get complicated if boundaries aren't clear." Later that evening, after everyone had left, I helped Nathan clean up the kitchen. "It was nice having everyone here," I said. "Just like old times." "Better than old times," Nathan corrected. "The house looks so much better now that I've updated everything." I paused, Bill's warning fresh in my mind. "Nathan, I'm glad you're comfortable here, but I think we need to clarify something. This is still my house. I'm happy you're staying here while you get established, but the property remains in my name." Nathan's face darkened. "I've been living here for almost a year, Dad. I've put work into this place. Money, too." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But improvements don't equal ownership. We never discussed transferring the property to you." "Fine," he said tersely. "It's your house. You've made that abundantly clear." The tension remained as I left that night. I hoped that clearing the air would help reset boundaries, but instead, it seemed to create a widening rift between us. 3 weeks later, just before Christmas, I received a call from my insurance company about a claim filed on the house. Apparently, there had been a significant roof leak during a heavy rainstorm. This was the first I'd heard of any damage. I immediately called Nathan. "Why didn't you tell me about the roof?" "I handled it," he said defensively. "Filed the claim and everything. But it's my insurance policy," I pointed out. "I should have been notified about damage to my property." "I live here," he retorted. "I dealt with the water coming through my ceiling and the damage to my things. I think I can handle talking to an insurance adjuster." The conversation ended with tension thick enough to cut. The next day, I called Terry Watson, a roofing contractor I'd known for years, to assess the damage properly. We arranged to meet at the house the following morning. When we arrived, the locks had been changed. I stood on the porch, key in hand, staring at the new deadbolt in disbelief. Terry waited awkwardly behind me as I rang the doorbell repeatedly. No answer. I called Nathan's cell. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text explaining I was outside with the roofer. No response. After 30 minutes, Terry had to leave for another appointment. I sat in my truck in the driveway, waiting. 3 hours later, Nathan's car pulled into the driveway. The conversation ended with tension thick enough to cut. The next day, I called Terry Watson, a roofing contractor I'd known for years, to assess the damage properly. We arranged to meet at the house the following morning. I came with Terry to check the roof damage, I explained, trying to keep my voice even. Why did you change the locks? Because I'm tired of you showing up whenever you feel like it, he snapped. This is where I live. I need privacy. Nathan, this is my property, I said, frustration finally breaking through. I have every right to access it, especially when there's damage that needs repair. Your property, he mimicked. Is that all you care about? Things? Possessions? What about my independence? My space? The argument escalated on the front lawn, with Nathan accusing me of not respecting his adulthood and me reminding him of the temporary nature of our arrangement. Eventually, he stormed inside, tossing a new key at me as he went. There. Now leave me alone. Over the next 2 months, our relationship deteriorated further. Our regular Sunday dinners stopped. When I did speak with him, the conversations were brief and strained. I discovered through mutual acquaintances that his stories about job interviews and promising career prospects were largely fabrications. He had taken a part-time position at a local electronics store, but was presenting himself to family and friends as a marketing consultant on the verge of a big break. The distance between us grew wider when spring arrived. I hadn't visited the house in over a month, respecting his demand for space while hoping the tension would ease naturally. When my sister Patricia called to invite us both to her daughter's wedding in April, I saw it as an opportunity to reconnect. The wedding was held at a beautiful vineyard 2 hours away. Nathan arrived separately and kept his distance during the ceremony. At the reception, I made efforts to engage him in conversation, but he remained aloof, spending most of his time at the bar or chatting with our younger relatives. As I was returning from the restroom, I overheard Nathan speaking to our cousin Jennifer and her husband by the dessert table. They were discussing real estate prices in our area, and what I heard stopped me cold. Yeah, the craftsman-style homes are really gaining value, Nathan was saying. I was lucky to inherit my place when Dad passed. It's in a prime neighborhood that's really coming up. Jennifer looked confused. Wait, Uncle Clifford passed away? I just saw him a few minutes ago, Nathan stammered, suddenly spotting me standing a few feet away. Oh no, I meant, it's complicated. He signed over the house to me last year when he moved into the smaller place. Basically an early inheritance. The blood drained from my face. Not only was Nathan lying about owning the house, but he was telling family members I was dead, or had willingly given him the property. In that moment, looking at my son's face, as he spun lies about me while I stood within earshot, I felt something break inside me. The Nathan I had raised seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. The Wednesday after the wedding, I received a call from my homeowner's insurance company again. They needed me to provide updated documentation for the property, because there had been multiple claims filed in recent months that I hadn't initiated. The agent mentioned water damage, electrical issues, and even a small kitchen fire. I was stunned. I wasn't notified about any of these claims. According to our records, the claims were submitted by Nathan Parks, who is listed as an occupant, the agent explained. But since you're the policyholder, we need your verification for the most recent claim. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table, worry gnawing at my stomach. What was happening to my house? What was happening to my son? I needed to see the property and assess the situation for myself. More importantly, I needed to access important documents I had stored in the home office before we moved, paperwork related to the property deed, insurance policies, and family records. I called Nathan first, determined to do this the right way. I need to come by today to pick up some important documents from the office filing cabinet, I explained when he answered. What documents? He asked suspiciously. Insurance papers, property records, tax information, things I need for my accountant. There was a long pause before he responded. I'm not comfortable with you going through things in my office. Nathan, they're my documents in my filing cabinet in my house, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. You can't just show up whenever you want and invade my privacy, he argued. I have a life here. I have routines. This isn't about privacy. These are important legal documents that belong to me. Fine, he finally conceded. But not today. I have plans. Maybe next week. This is urgent, Nathan. I need those papers now. Well, that's not going to happen, he said coldly. This is my home now, and you need to respect that. The call ended with him hanging up on me. I sat in silence, contemplating my options. After considerable thought, I decided to use my key while Nathan was at work. I didn't want to enter without his knowledge, but I needed those documents, and I had growing concerns about the condition of the property based on the insurance claims. The following day at 11 in the morning, When I knew Nathan would be at the electronics store, I drove to the house. I was relieved to find my key still worked in the side door leading through the garage. As I stepped inside, I was immediately struck by the stale odor and the state of disarray. Cardboard pizza boxes were stacked on the kitchen counter. Empty beer bottles lined the windowsill. Moving through the house, my concern deepened. Water stains spread across the ceiling in the hallway. A section of hardwood flooring in the living room had buckled from moisture damage. The beautiful bay window in the dining room that Margaret had loved had a crack running through one pane, crudely patched with duct tape. I made my way to the home office, where the filing cabinet should have been. The room had been completely rearranged, now set up with a large gaming computer, multiple monitors, and what appeared to be cryptocurrency mining equipment running loudly in the corner. The heat in the room was stifling. The filing cabinet was pushed into the closet. When I pulled it open, I found many folders missing completely. Others had been haphazardly stuffed back, papers crumpled and out of order. The property deed folder was empty. The insurance documentation was gone. Increasingly alarmed, I searched the desk drawers and shelves. In the bottom desk drawer, under a stack of gaming magazines, I found a folder containing loan application papers. My heart nearly stopped when I saw my own signature at the bottom of several documents, a signature I had never provided. One was an application for a second mortgage on the property for $175,000. Another was for a personal loan using the house as collateral. I was so absorbed in my shocking discovery that I didn't hear the side door open. Nathan's voice startled me. "What the hell are you doing in here?" I spun around to see my son standing in the doorway, his face contorted with anger. "The store closed early for inventory," he said, his eyes darting to the papers in my hand. "Nathan," I said, holding up the documents. "What is this? Did you forge my signature on loan applications? You're going through my private things?" He deflected, snatching the papers from my hand. "You broke into my house?" "I didn't break in. I used my key to my own property," I corrected, struggling to remain calm. "And you didn't answer my question about these loan documents. You had no right to come here when I specifically told you not to," he shouted, ignoring the forgery accusation. "This is my home! You're invading my privacy! Nathan, look around." I gestured at the water damage visible on the office ceiling. "What's happening here? The house is falling apart. There are insurance claims I know nothing about, and now I find loan applications with what appears to be my forged signature." "Get out," he demanded, his face flushed with anger. "Get out right now." "Not until you explain what's going on," I insisted, standing my ground. "This is serious, Nathan. Forgery is a crime. And what have you done to the house?" The insurance company mentioned multiple claims. "Things happen in houses. I've been taking care of it." "Taking care of it? There's water damage everywhere. The floors are ruined, and it smells like nothing's been cleaned in months." As our argument escalated, a young woman I'd never seen before appeared in the doorway behind Nathan. She had a phone in her hand, pointed directly at me. "Who's this?" I asked, momentarily thrown off. "This is Emily," Nathan said, "my girlfriend. She's been living here for the past 3 months." "Living here?" I repeated, blindsided by this new information. "You never mentioned having a roommate or girlfriend moving in." "I don't need your permission," he shot back. Emily stepped forward, still filming. "Nathan told me about you," she said coolly. "How you can't let go and keep trying to control his life. You should know I'm recording this for our protection." "Protection from what?" "I'm his father, and I own this house," I said, incredulous at the bizarre turn of events. "Actually," Emily replied with a smirk, "Nathan has been establishing tenancy here for over a year now. In this state, that gives him certain rights you can't just override." "What are you talking about?" I looked between them, confusion mixing with my anger. "I think you should leave now," Nathan said, "before this gets any worse. I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers about these forged loan documents and the damage to my property," I insisted. Nathan pulled out his phone. "Fine. Then I'm calling the police to report a break-in." "Break-in? Nathan, this is my house. I have every legal right to be here." But he was already dialing, and Emily continued filming my reaction. "Yes, I need to report an intruder in my home," Nathan said into the phone. "My father broke in while I was at work and is refusing to leave. No, I don't feel safe." "Yes, that's the address." I stood in shocked disbelief as my own son reported me to the police. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. I tried to explain the situation calmly, showing them my identification with the property address and explaining that I was the legal owner. Nathan and Emily presented their side, claiming I had entered against their wishes and was harassing them. The officers, clearly uncomfortable with the family dispute, suggested I leave for now to de-escalate the situation. But the loan documents, I protested. He's forged my signature, and I need my property papers that he's taken. Sir, this appears to be a civil matter, one officer explained gently. If there are disputes about property or documents, you'll need to address those through proper legal channels. Right now, we just need to ensure everyone's safety. As I was escorted out of my own house by police officers, with my son and his girlfriend watching from the doorway, I felt a deep sense of betrayal unlike anything I'd experienced before. The reality was clear now. This wasn't just about a temporary living arrangement gone wrong. Something much more calculated was happening, and I needed to find out what it was before I lost everything. 3 days later, I received a certified letter that turned my world upside down. It was a formal legal notice, claiming that Nathan had established adverse possession rights to the property after my abandonment of it. The letter further stated that any attempts to enter the premises without written permission would be considered trespassing and would result in immediate legal action. I could barely comprehend what I was reading. Adverse possession? Abandonment? I had never abandoned my property. I had simply allowed my son to stay there temporarily. The document was signed by a lawyer named James Whitfield, from a firm I didn't recognize. First thing Monday morning, I called Sandra Powell, an attorney who had handled my will and other legal matters after Margaret's death. Her secretary scheduled an emergency appointment for that afternoon. Sandra's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, filled with law books and the comforting smell of old leather and wood polish. I handed her the letter without comment, watching her face as she read. "This is quite serious, Clifford," she said finally, setting the paper down. Adverse possession is a legal doctrine that allows someone to claim ownership of a property if they've been openly living there and treating it as their own for a certain period, while the actual owner has abandoned it. But I never abandoned it, I protested. I've been paying the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance. I've been maintaining it. I just let my son stay there temporarily. How long has he been there now? She asked. About 14 months. She nodded thoughtfully. That's not long enough for a legitimate adverse possession claim in our state. They typically require years of occupation, usually 7 to 10. But that doesn't mean he can't cause significant legal headaches. What should I do? First, we need to gather all your documentation, proving ownership and ongoing maintenance of the property. Mortgage statements, tax records, insurance payments, repair receipts, anything showing your continued investment in and connection to the property. As we talked through my options, I mentioned the forged loan applications I discovered. Sandra's expression grew more serious. That's a separate issue entirely, and potentially a criminal matter. Did you report it to the police? I tried to mention it when they came to the house, but they said it was a civil matter. We'll need to address that separately, she noted. For now, let's focus on protecting your ownership rights. I'm going to file a formal response to this letter and initiate eviction proceedings. The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork and sleepless nights. I gathered all the documentation Sandra requested, which proved challenging since many important papers had been in the house. Fortunately, I had digital copies of tax records and bank statements showing mortgage payments. The stress began taking a physical toll. My blood pressure, usually stable, shot up to dangerous levels. I developed persistent heartburn and started losing weight. During a particularly bad night, when chest pains sent me to the emergency room, the doctor warned me that stress was exacerbating my existing heart condition. You need to find a way to resolve whatever is causing this anxiety, he advised. Your heart can't take this kind of prolonged stress. Meanwhile, Sandra had been investigating Nathan's girlfriend Emily and made a disturbing discovery. Her father was Robert Chandler, a prominent local real estate developer, known for buying properties in transitional neighborhoods and building luxury condominiums. The area where my house was located had recently been rezoned for mixed-use development, significantly increasing property values. You need to find a way to resolve whatever is causing this anxiety, he advised. Your heart can't take this kind of prolonged stress. We attempted mediation, hoping to resolve the situation without a full court battle. Nathan arrived with his attorney, but refused all compromise offers. He wouldn't agree to move out, wouldn't return my documents, and insisted he had verbal promises from me that the house would be his. Dad always said this house would be mine someday, he claimed during the mediation session. I've put time and money into improving it based on that promise. As news of our dispute spread among family and friends, people began taking sides. Most supported me, but a few questioned whether I was being too rigid, suggesting that perhaps I had indeed promised Nathan the house at some point and forgotten. My brother Bill and his wife Susan were firmly in my corner. "This isn't the Nathan we know," Susan said during one of their visits to check on me. "Something's changed in him, and I suspect that girlfriend and her family have a lot to do with it." Through Sandra's investigative work, we uncovered that Emily's father's development company had recently purchased 2 other properties on my street. A pattern emerged. They were systematically buying parcels in the neighborhood for an upcoming project. The most shocking revelation came when Sandra obtained a copy of the preliminary development plans through a contact at the city planning department. My property was marked as pending acquisition on their maps, with a purchase price significantly above market value listed beside it. "They're planning to include your property in their development," Sandra explained, "and they're willing to pay a premium for it. My guess is they've promised Nathan a substantial payday if he can secure ownership." The piece that still didn't fit was how Nathan expected to actually gain legal ownership of a property that was clearly mine. The adverse possession claim was flimsy at best, and easily disproven with my documentation. The answer came a week before our court date, when Sandra received the exhibits Nathan's lawyer intended to present as evidence. Among them were emails and text messages purportedly showing me promising Nathan the house as an early inheritance. There were also documents suggesting I had verbally relinquished any claim to the property. "These are fabricated," I said immediately upon seeing them. "I never sent these emails or texts." Sandra nodded grimly. "I suspected as much. We'll need to have them analyzed by a digital forensics expert." The court date arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. I barely slept the night before, my stomach in knots. The weight of potentially losing my home, but more importantly, the permanent fracturing of my relationship with my only child, pressed down on me like a physical force. The county courthouse was an imposing stone building in the center of town. I arrived early with Sandra, my hands shaking slightly as we passed through security. Nathan was already there, sitting confidently on a bench outside the courtroom in an expensive-looking navy suit I'd never seen before. Emily sat beside him, along with an older couple I assumed were her parents. They were deep in conversation with a polished-looking attorney who I recognized from his billboards around town. When our case was called, we filed into the courtroom. Judge Helen Ramirez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, presided. Nathan's attorney presented their case first, painting me as a controlling father unwilling to release his grip on his adult son's independence. "Your Honor, Nathan Parks has been living in this residence for nearly 15 months, treating it as his own home with the understanding that his father had given it to him as an early inheritance. Mr. Parks Sr. has continued to pay the mortgage merely as a gift to his son, similar to how parents might help with college tuition. Only when Nathan began asserting his independence did his father suddenly claim there was no such arrangement." The attorney presented the altered emails and text messages, along with photographs showing Nathan's improvements to the property. What they called improvements were actually hastily made cosmetic changes covering the substantial damage beneath. Several character witnesses testified on Nathan's behalf, friends I barely knew, who claimed Nathan had always referred to it as his house, and had spoken about my supposed gift of the property to him. Emily's testimony was particularly cutting. She described me as an intrusive, controlling father who couldn't accept my adult son's independence. Nathan would get anxious whenever his father was coming over, she claimed. He was always worried about Clifford criticizing his choices or trying to take over. The day Clifford broke in, Nathan was physically ill with stress afterward. Throughout their testimony, I noticed Judge Ramirez watching me carefully, her expression revealing nothing. When Sandra finally stood to present our case, I felt the weight of the judge's skepticism. "Your Honor," Sandra began, "this case isn't about a controlling father unwilling to let go. It's about a son attempting to fraudulently claim ownership of a property that legally belongs to my client, likely for financial gain connected to an upcoming development project in the neighborhood." I watched Nathan's face as Sandra laid out our case. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. The second day of court proceedings began with Sandra methodically dismantling Nathan's adverse possession claim. She presented my mortgage statements, property tax records, and insurance documents, all showing my continuous financial responsibility for the property. "Your Honor, adverse possession requires that the original owner has abandoned the property," Sandra explained. "As these records clearly demonstrate, Mr. Parks has consistently maintained financial responsibility for this home. There has been no abandonment, only a father's generosity in allowing his son to live rent-free in a property he owns." She called my brother Bill to testify about the Thanksgiving dinner where Nathan had repeatedly referred to my house and Bill had questioned me about it afterward. Clifford never indicated to any family members that he had given Nathan the house, Bill stated firmly. In fact, he expressed concern to me about Nathan's increasing possessiveness about a property that wasn't his. Next came testimonies from several of my neighbors, who confirmed my regular presence at the property for maintenance and visits. Martin Green, who lived next door, described seeing me fixing gutters, mowing the lawn, and checking on the house regularly until recent months. Cliff has always taken good care of that house, Martin testified. Even after his son moved in, I'd see him there at least once a week doing maintenance. It wasn't until this past winter that his visits seemed to stop. Sandra then called Frank Torres, a contractor who had done various repairs on the house over the years. Frank testified about being contacted by me to inspect the roof damage, only to find that the locks had been changed when we arrived. In all my years working with Clifford, he's always been diligent about maintaining that property, Frank stated. He would never abandon it or neglect needed repairs if he knew about them. Throughout the morning testimonies, I noticed Nathan becoming increasingly uncomfortable. He whispered frequently to his attorney and avoided looking in my direction. Emily and her parents maintained composed expressions, but I could see tension in their posture. After lunch, Sandra presented bank statements showing all mortgage payments coming directly from my account, as well as records of property tax payments I'd made consistently since purchasing the home 30 years ago. Your Honor, Sandra said, we would also like to address the emails and text messages presented by the plaintiff as evidence of an agreement to transfer ownership. She introduced Roger Kinney, a digital forensics expert who had analyzed the electronic communications. The messages presented show clear signs of manipulation, Roger testified. Timestamps have been altered, and content appears to have been inserted into existing message threads. Based on my analysis, I believe these communications have been tampered with to create the appearance of promises that were never actually made. Nathan's attorney objected vigorously, but Judge Ramirez allowed the testimony to continue. By mid-afternoon, Sandra moved to what she called critical evidence, requiring the court's immediate attention. She requested permission to present documentation regarding possible fraudulent loan applications. Your Honor, during my client's visit to his property, he discovered loan applications with his forged signature. We believe these documents demonstrate a pattern of fraudulent activity relevant to the ownership dispute before the court. Nathan's attorney leapt to his feet. Objection! These allegations are outside the scope of the current proceedings and highly prejudicial. Judge Ramirez considered briefly. I'll allow it, but keep it focused on matters relevant to the property dispute. Sandra nodded and presented copies of the loan applications I had discovered, along with samples of my authentic signature for comparison. As you can see, Your Honor, these signatures purporting to be Mr. Parks's are clear forgeries. More troubling is the nature of these applications. They attempt to secure loans using the property as collateral, loans that would have provided substantial cash while leaving my client liable for the debt. She then called me to the stand. Under her careful questioning, I described finding the documents, the condition of the house, and the confrontation that followed. Mr. Parks, she asked, at any point did you promise to give this house to your son as an early inheritance, or make any verbal agreement transferring ownership? Absolutely not, I stated firmly. I allowed Nathan to stay there temporarily while he got back on his feet financially. There was never any discussion of transferring ownership. And the loan applications with your apparent signature, did you authorize those or have any knowledge of them before discovering them in your home office? No, I did not. I never authorized anyone to take out loans against my property, and I certainly never signed those documents. Nathan's attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, trying to suggest I had made verbal promises I'd forgotten, or that I was punishing Nathan for his independence. Throughout the questioning, I maintained my composure, answering truthfully and directly. As the day's proceedings wound down, Judge Ramirez made an unusual request. Before we continue tomorrow, I'd like to see the complete loan application packages referenced in today's testimony. The full documents, including all pages and attachments. Sandra agreed to provide them, and court was adjourned until the following morning. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, emotionally drained. The physical toll of the stress had left me exhausted, but there was also a strange sense of relief in having the truth finally exposed in a public forum. Whatever the outcome, the facts were now on record. The next morning, we returned to find Judge Ramirez reviewing documents at her bench. She looked up as we entered, her expression grave. Counselors, approach the bench, she directed. Sandra and Nathan's attorney stepped forward for a private conference. From my seat, I could see Nathan shifting nervously beside Emily, whose parents were conspicuously absent today. When the attorneys returned to their tables, Sandra's expression was calm, but determined. Nathan's lawyer looked distinctly uncomfortable. Judge Ramirez addressed the courtroom. After reviewing the complete loan application documents provided, I have concerns about potentially criminal activities that extend beyond this civil case. Before proceeding, I want both parties to be aware that I may be obligated to refer certain matters to the district attorney's office for investigation. Nathan's face visibly paled. His attorney quickly requested a brief recess to confer with his client. Judge Ramirez granted 30 minutes. In the hallway outside, Sandra explained what had happened. The judge reviewed what's known as page 2 of the loan applications, which contains information about the purpose of the loans and disbursement instructions. What she found was quite damning. Nathan had nearly completed processing a second mortgage that would have provided $175,000 cash, with the money directed to accounts in his name. You would have remained responsible for the debt while he walked away with the cash. I can't believe he would go this far, I said, the betrayal cutting deep. There's more, Sandra continued. The applications contain statements claiming you were aware of and approved the loans, with forged initials on each page. The judge recognizes this as potential fraud, which is why she mentioned the district attorney. When court resumed, Nathan's demeanor had completely changed. The confident posture was gone, replaced by a hunched, nervous energy. His attorney immediately requested permission to approach the bench again, where he and Sandra conferred with the judge for several minutes. Finally, Judge Ramirez addressed the court. In light of new information, the plaintiff has indicated a desire to withdraw his claim of adverse possession and tenancy rights. Before I rule on this request, I want to be clear about what the court has uncovered. She held up a document from her bench. What we have here goes beyond a family disagreement about property. The evidence suggests a coordinated attempt to defraud Mr. Clifford Parks through forged loan documents that could have resulted in substantial financial harm. She turned her attention directly to Nathan. Mr. Nathan Parks, while this is a civil proceeding and not a criminal one, I am troubled by what appears to be deliberate fraudulent activity. The loan applications submitted as evidence contain multiple forged signatures and false statements that could constitute serious crimes under state law. Nathan stared at the table, unable to meet her gaze. I am dismissing the plaintiff's claims with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. Further, I am issuing an order requiring Nathan Parks to vacate the property at 247 Maple Street within 7 days. All personal belongings may be removed, but fixtures and permanent additions to the home remain with the property. The judge continued. I am also issuing a warning. While I am not referring this matter to criminal authorities at this time, this court strongly advises against any further attempts to claim ownership or financial interest in this property through fraudulent means. Such actions could result in criminal charges. Nathan's face had drained of all color. Emily, who had been whispering urgently to him moments before, suddenly gathered her purse and quietly slipped out of the courtroom without a backward glance. Judge Ramirez concluded the proceedings with a final statement that I would never forget. The foundation of property law, and indeed of family relationships, is trust. When that trust is violated for personal gain, the damage extends far beyond financial considerations. This court sincerely hopes that in time, and with appropriate boundaries, healing might be possible. But that healing must begin with honesty and accountability, not further deception. When court resumed, Nathan's demeanor had completely changed. The confident posture was gone, replaced by a hunched, nervous energy. His attorney immediately requested permission to approach the bench again, where he and Sandra conferred with the judge for several minutes. In the days following the court decision, I faced the uncomfortable task of reclaiming my house. Sandra advised me to be present when Nathan moved out, both to ensure nothing was damaged during the process and to document the condition of the property. Bring someone with you, she suggested. Your brother Bill, perhaps. Having a witness can prevent any confrontation from escalating. The Saturday morning of the move-out arrived with gray skies threatening rain. Bill met me at my apartment, his truck ready to help transport any salvageable items to storage if needed. How are you holding up? He asked as we drove to the house. Honestly, I don't know, I replied. I keep cycling between anger, heartbreak, and just emptiness. When we arrived, a small moving truck was already in the driveway. Nathan was carrying boxes to it, avoiding eye contact as we approached. Emily was nowhere to be seen, nor was there any sign of her parents or their representatives. Need any help? I offered awkwardly, unsure how to navigate this new, strained reality. I've got it, Nathan replied flatly. Bill and I went inside to assess the property. The damage was worse than I remembered. Beyond the water stains and buckled flooring, there were holes in several walls, apparently from failed attempt to mount televisions or shelves. The beautiful built-in cabinets in the dining room that Margaret had lovingly restored had been painted black, with cheap paint that dripped down the ornate woodwork. In the kitchen, the vintage tile countertop had been partially demolished, with a mismatched granite slab haphazardly installed over half of it. The guest bathroom toilet was cracked and leaking into the subflooring. Bill whistled low. This is going to take some serious work to restore. As we continued our inspection, Nathan maintained his distance, focusing on moving his belongings. By early afternoon, the truck was loaded with his personal items, furniture I didn't recognize, and the expensive gaming equipment from the office. Before he left, I made one last attempt at conversation. Nathan, I know things have gone badly between us, but you're still my son. I hope someday we can talk about all this. He paused at the front door, keys in hand. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the boy I'd raised, vulnerability behind the anger, but it vanished quickly. I need to go, he said, placing the house keys on the entryway table. He hesitated, then added, I left the family photos in boxes in the attic. They're all there. It was a small concession, but in that moment, it felt significant. After Nathan drove away, Bill helped me secure the house. We changed the locks, checked that all windows were secure, and took detailed photographs of the damage for insurance purposes. What will you do now? Bill asked as we finished. First, I need to find all the important documents Nathan took, I said. Then, assess what repairs are most critical. After that, I don't know. Selling might be the easiest option, given everything that's happened. That evening, alone in my apartment, I received an unexpected text from Emily. I'm sorry about everything. You should know the development company is still planning to approach you with an offer for the house. Nathan was supposed to get a 10% finder's fee if he secured the property. I've ended things with him and moved back home. The message confirmed what Sandra had suspected about financial motivations behind Nathan's actions. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it added another layer to understand the situation. The potential payoff from the development company must have been substantial, creating a powerful incentive for deception. Over the next 2 weeks, I focused on practical matters. I filed insurance claims for the damage, hired contractors for estimates, and sorted through what remained in the house. In the attic, I found the boxes of family photos Nathan had mentioned, seemingly untouched since he'd removed them from the walls. Looking at Margaret's smiling face in those images brought both comfort and renewed grief for how far our family had fallen. The development company did indeed approach me with an offer, just as Emily had warned. Robert Chandler himself called, extending what he called a premium offer for the property. Given its location and the upcoming neighborhood revitalization, we're prepared to pay 30% above current market value, he explained smoothly. I listened to his pitch without comment, then simply said, I'll consider it, and have my attorney contact yours if I'm interested. Sandra advised against making any immediate decisions. Take your time. The property isn't going anywhere, and its value will likely increase as the development progresses. 3 weeks after the court case, I received an unexpected letter in my mailbox. There was no return address, but I recognized Nathan's handwriting immediately. With shaking hands, I opened it. Dad, it began. I don't expect you to forgive what I've done, but I need you to know I'm sorry. There's no excuse for my actions. The opportunity for quick money clouded my judgment, and I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. When Emily's father approached me about the house, I should have come to you honestly. Instead, I let myself be convinced that I deserved the property and the payoff that would come with it. I lied to myself that you owed me this, that it was just an early inheritance anyway. Emily left the day of the court decision. Her family cut ties with me once I was no longer useful to their plans. I've been staying with a friend, looking for a new job and a place to live. I lost my position at the electronics store because I missed too many shifts during the court proceedings. I know words mean nothing at this point. My actions destroyed the trust between us. But I want you to know that I recognize how badly I've hurt you, and I take full responsibility for everything I did. The forgeries, the lies, all of it was wrong. You've always been a good father. Even when Mom died and you were grieving yourself, you never let me feel abandoned. You worked those double shifts without complaint to give me opportunities. I repaid all that sacrifice with betrayal, and I'll have to live with that knowledge. I don't expect a response to this letter. I just needed you to know that I understand what I've done, and I'm truly sorry. Nathan. I read the letter multiple times, emotions washing over me in waves. There was anger still, certainly, but also a small spark of hope that perhaps my son was beginning to recognize the gravity of his actions. Later that week, I spoke with Sandra about what legal protections I should maintain moving forward. We discussed restraining orders and other formal boundaries, but ultimately, I decided against them for the time being. I need protection for the property, I explained, but I don't want to close the door completely on eventually rebuilding some kind of relationship. He is still my only child. Sandra nodded understandingly. In that case, I recommend a formal, written rental agreement if he ever wants to stay in any property you own again. Clear boundaries about access, expectations, and consequences. And, perhaps suggesting some counseling, both individual and joint. Do you think that's naive? I asked. Considering everything that's happened? Cautious forgiveness isn't naive, Clifford, she replied. Just make sure it's paired with appropriate boundaries. In the months that followed, I divided my time between restoring the house and rebuilding my health, which had suffered during the prolonged stress. The property repairs were extensive, but progressing well. I decided against selling to the development company, at least for now. One Saturday morning, as I was scraping old paint from the dining room built-ins, my phone rang. It was Nathan. Dad, he said, his voice uncertain. I was wondering if we could talk, face to face. I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, he was already there, looking thinner than I remembered, and noticeably less polished, without Emily's influence. Our conversation was awkward at first, both of us carefully avoiding triggers that might reignite old tensions. Nathan explained that he'd found a new job at a marketing firm one town over, entry-level but with growth potential. He'd also started seeing a therapist to work through what he called his entitlement issues. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, he said toward the end of our meeting. I know I've broken something fundamental between us, but I'd like the chance to try to make amends, somehow. I nodded slowly. That's going to take time, Nathan, and concrete actions, not just words. I understand, he replied. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes, for however long it takes. As we parted, I didn't offer a hug, or even a handshake. The distance between us remained substantial, but there was a tiny opening, a small possibility that, with time and effort, something new might be built from the ashes of what was lost. 6 months after the court case, the old Craftsman house with the red door was finally restored. The water damage had been repaired, floors refinished, and walls repainted in the warm colors Margaret had chosen years ago. The family photos were back on the walls, including a prominent portrait of Margaret in the hallway. I had decided not to sell, at least not yet. The house represented too much of our family history to let it go, especially to a development company that would likely demolish it for condominiums. Instead, I was considering moving back in myself once all the repairs were complete. My relationship with Nathan remained complicated, but was slowly mending. After several more coffee shop conversations, we had progressed to meeting for occasional dinners. He had secured his position at the marketing firm and had found a small apartment he could afford on his salary. Following Sandra's advice, we had both begun seeing Dr. Loretta Winters, a family therapist specializing in estrangement and reconciliation, first in separate sessions, then eventually together. The joint sessions were often painful, dredging up not only the recent betrayal but older resentments and misunderstandings that had contributed to our breakdown. Your father's generous offer of free housing may have inadvertently fostered dependence rather than growth, Dr. Winters observed during one session. And Nathan, your grief over your mother's death seems to have transformed into a sense of entitlement, as if the world owed you something to compensate for that loss. These insights were difficult to hear, but rang true. I had to acknowledge that my desire to protect Nathan after Margaret's death had sometimes crossed into enabling behavior, and Nathan had to confront how he had used his motherless childhood as an excuse for taking shortcuts rather than earning his way. One breakthrough came when I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Did you ever really intend to pay back those loans you were trying to secure with my forged signature? Or was the plan always to leave me with the debt? Nathan's face crumpled with shame. At first, I told myself I'd pay them back eventually. But honestly, once Emily and her father started talking about the development payoff, I think I knew I'd just walk away with the money. I convinced myself you could afford it, that you owed me somehow. The raw honesty was both painful and necessary. It allowed us to stop dancing around the severity of what had happened and address it directly. 4 months into our therapy, Dr. Winters suggested a practical exercise in rebuilding trust. Clifford, the house repairs are almost complete, correct? She asked. I nodded. Just finishing touches now. I think it might be healing for both of you if Nathan contributed to those final repairs. Not financially, but with his time and labor. A tangible way to begin making amends for the damage. The following weekend, Nathan arrived at the house in work clothes, ready to help install new bathroom fixtures and touch up paint. The work was initially performed in awkward silence, both of us unsure how to interact in this space that had been the center of our conflict. By midday, as we struggled together to install a particularly stubborn sink faucet, the tension began to ease. The shared frustration with the plumbing somehow normalized our interaction. "Your mother always hated this faucet," I remarked, wrestling with a corroded pipe. "She said it dripped just to spite her." Nathan smiled slightly. "I remember. She used to talk to it when she thought no one was listening, threatening it with replacement if it didn't behave." The shared memory created a small bridge between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement of our shared history beyond the recent pain. Over the following months, these work sessions became regular occurrences. Nathan would come on Saturday mornings, and we would tackle projects around the house together. Sometimes we worked in silence, sometimes with careful conversation. Gradually, the house that had become a battleground transformed into neutral territory, then slowly back into something resembling a family home. During one of these sessions, while we were repainting the kitchen, Nathan raised the subject that had been carefully avoided. "Dad, I've been thinking about what would be fair regarding the damage costs," he said, focusing intently on cutting in around the window trim. "I know the insurance covered some of it, but not all. I want to repay you for the rest." I continued rolling paint onto the adjacent wall, considering my response. "That's a substantial amount, Nathan." During one of these sessions, while we were repainting the kitchen, Nathan raised the subject that had been carefully avoided. The offer was significant, not for the money itself, but for what it represented, a concrete acknowledgement of responsibility and a commitment to making amends. "We can work out a reasonable payment plan," I agreed. "But I don't want it to prevent you from building your own financial stability." That evening, after Nathan had gone, I sat on the newly repaired back porch steps, reflecting on our progress. The house around me stood solid again, no longer bearing visible scars from the damage it had endured. Our relationship remained more fragile, the repairs more tentative, but it too was gradually being rebuilt. I thought about what Judge Ramirez had said in her final statement, about trust being the foundation of both property law and family relationships. She was right. Trust, once broken, couldn't simply be declared restored. It had to be rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions and demonstrated change. Nathan was doing that work now, showing up reliably for our Saturday projects, making his agreed monthly payments toward the damage costs, continuing with therapy. He had found a small but respectable apartment and was advancing at his marketing job through legitimate effort rather than shortcuts and deception. That evening, after Nathan had gone, I sat on the newly repaired back porch steps, reflecting on our progress. The house around me stood solid again, no longer bearing visible scars from the damage it had endured. Our relationship remained more fragile, the repairs more tentative, but it too was gradually being rebuilt. "Nathan, I've been thinking about the house," I began. "I'm not going to move back in after all." He looked up, clearly assuming I was finally selling to the development company. "I understand, after everything that happened here. Actually, I'm considering a different arrangement," I continued. "I'd like to propose a legitimate rental agreement. You living here, paying fair market rent, with clear written terms and boundaries." His eyes widened with surprise. "You trust me to live here again? After everything?" "Trust is earned back through actions over time," I said. "You've been putting in that work. This would be another step in the process, with appropriate safeguards for both of us." We discussed the details. A formal lease drawn up by Sandra, monthly inspections for the first 6 months, strict terms regarding property maintenance and guests, and a requirement that Nathan continue therapy. "I don't deserve this second chance," he said quietly, when we'd finished outlining terms. "This isn't about deserving," I replied. "It's about choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past. But Nathan, this is the only second chance. There won't be a third." He nodded solemnly. "I understand." 2 weeks later, Nathan signed the formal rental agreement in Sandra's office. The terms were strict but fair, protecting my property rights while giving Nathan an opportunity to rebuild his life and our relationship. As Nathan settled back into the house under very different circumstances than before, our Saturday work sessions continued. No longer necessary for repairs, they became more about maintenance and occasional improvements. We built a new deck off the back porch, something Margaret had always wanted. We planted a small garden in the side yard. During one of these sessions, while taking a break on the new deck, Nathan asked a question that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you think Mom would be disappointed in how I turned out?" I considered the question carefully, watching a pair of cardinals in the maple tree beyond the yard. "Your mother never had unrealistic expectations that people would be perfect. She believed in growth and learning from mistakes. I think she'd be disappointed by the choices you made, but proud of how you're working to make amends." He nodded, accepting this complex truth. "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry for what I did to her house." "She knew you better than anyone," I said. "Better than you knew yourself sometimes. I think she would have seen this coming before either of us did, and maybe could have helped prevent it." The mention of Margaret, once a source of shared grief, now created a connection between us. We could acknowledge her absence, while recognizing how her values continued to shape our efforts to rebuild. 18 months after the court case, I received an offer for a consulting position in Phoenix, helping to establish safety protocols for a new manufacturing facility. The 6-month contract came with excellent compensation and the opportunity for extended work if things went well. Nathan and I discussed what this meant for our arrangement with the house. By this point, he had been a reliable tenant for 6 months, paying rent on time and maintaining the property well. "I think you've earned some independence from the monthly inspections," I told him. "While I'm in Phoenix, we'll move to quarterly checks by the property management company Sandra recommended." The trust implied by this change was significant. Nathan recognized it as such. "Thank you, Dad. I won't let you down this time." The night before my flight to Phoenix, Nathan invited me to dinner at the house. When I arrived, I was surprised to find Bill and Susan there as well, along with my sister Patricia. "A proper send-off," Nathan explained, ushering me into the dining room where he'd prepared an impressive meal. During dinner, conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. The family dynamics were different now, shaped by our shared experience of rupture and partial healing. There remained an underlying caution, a knowledge that something precious had been damaged and repaired imperfectly. But there was also genuine warmth and cautious optimism. As the evening wound down, Nathan presented me with a gift, a framed photo of Margaret, Nathan, and me from a camping trip when Nathan was around 10 years old. It was one of the photos he had removed from the walls and stored in the attic during his attempt to erase our shared history. "A proper send-off," Nathan explained, ushering me into the dining room where he'd prepared an impressive meal. The gesture touched me deeply. This wasn't the end of our journey toward reconciliation, merely another milestone along the way. There would still be difficult moments, setbacks, and necessary conversations in the future, but the foundation for a new kind of relationship had been established. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I reflected on the painful journey we had traveled. The house with the red door had been the backdrop for our family's greatest joys and deepest sorrows. It had witnessed Margaret's death, Nathan's childhood, our gradual drift apart, the shocking betrayal, and now the careful reconstruction of trust. I had nearly lost that house to deception, but in fighting to keep it, I had ultimately found something more valuable, a pathway back to an authentic relationship with my son. Not the idealized relationship I might have once imagined, but one grounded in reality, with clear boundaries and honest acknowledgement of our capacities for both harm and healing. The judge's words had indeed silenced Nathan's claims in that courtroom a year and a half ago. But the true silencing had come later, in quieter moments, when he first acknowledged the full extent of his betrayal, when he committed to making amends through consistent action rather than empty promises, when he accepted responsibility without excuses. This was the deeper lesson I carried with me as I prepared for my temporary move to Phoenix, that some betrayals can be survived, some bridges rebuilt, if both parties are willing to do the difficult work of honest confrontation, followed by consistent, concrete efforts to change. Not every broken relationship can or should be repaired, but with clear boundaries, professional guidance, and genuine commitment to growth, healing remains possible, even after profound betrayal. And for those willing to embark on that challenging journey, the rewards can be immeasurable. Not a perfect restoration of what was lost, but the creation of something new and potentially stronger, forged in the fires of painful truth, and tempered by the cooling waters of earned forgiveness. Have you ever faced a betrayal from someone you trusted deeply? How did you decide whether to cut ties completely or attempt to rebuild the relationship? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find comfort in knowing that healing is possible, even after profound betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. and I wish you wisdom and clarity in navigating your own complex relationships.